This is Into the Multiverse with Josh Peck.
Hello and welcome to Into the Multiverse. Hey, we're back in the studio. Boy, it is good to be back. I want to thank all of you out there for all the prayers and encouragement that you sent my way through this whole knee surgery process. It was a relatively minor surgery, but it did take me out for a few weeks. Also, I want to say thank you for those who kept watching because, surprisingly, I was quite surprised by this. We did not see any significant dip in views based on me having to record Into the Multiverse from home. You know, I figured not being in the set, having to have a backdrop and do all that, not having access to the professional equipment that we have here at Skywatch was, I was worried I might lose some viewers over that. But apparently my worries were unwarranted because all you guys stuck with me and I greatly appreciate that. And if you have not been following our other outlets, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. Christina and I are having another baby. This will be baby number 4. It's a little over 9 weeks right now, 9 weeks old. Everything's healthy. We're very excited. And we just had our first ultrasound. Everything is good and clear. So I would appreciate some prayers for that as well. Prayers for Christina. She's been dealing with a heavy dose of morning sickness, but she's a rock star. She's trudging through it and she's doing an amazing job. So I wanted to tell all of you that. And just thank you so much for your prayer, support, and encouragement. Also, if you haven't had a chance to do so, make sure you subscribe, click the little bell, and YouTube might not notify you anyway. If that's the case, just know that every Thursday morning, no matter what, at 9 a.m., you will get a new episode. I probably shouldn't say, no matter what. That's almost like tempting fate. But I'll tell you, we've been doing this show for well over 2 years now. I think it's this would be episode 120 something, 130 something, and we have not missed a week since we started. So, and that's been through illnesses and surgeries and pregnancies with Christina and all sorts of things. So we have managed to keep going without missing a week yet or rerunning an episode. There was even a couple times that Derek and Sharon had to guest host, as did Joe Artis Horn. So we're going to keep doing this every week as much as we can. It would take a lot to break that up. So have you ever heard of negative gravity? Now, I know on this show we have talked about negative mass, but there is a such thing called negative gravity, apparently. That's at least what a new paper from Columbia University is suggesting. So a team of physicists from Columbia University just put out a paper suggesting that there could be particles in existence that have negative gravity and negative mass, but the consequence of that is negative gravity. And these particles might be more familiar than we think. What's so fascinating about this is if it's true, it wouldn't be the same as, say, a helium balloon floating up in the air. It's not the same idea as that because gravity is still pulling down on the helium balloon. The only difference is the helium is lighter than the air, so it floats up in the medium of the air. It's not quite the same idea. This would be more comparable to two opposing magnets, two magnets, actually opposites attract, but when you flip it around, you have them repel against each other. It's more similar to that. And when considering that, you could think of, this is why the helium balloon analogy really wouldn't fit here. It's the same as if you put a basketball in a pool of water. The water is what's called the medium, the thing that is around the basketball, what the basketball is submerged in. But the basketball, even though gravity is still pulling down on it, the basketball floats up because the air in the basketball is lighter than the medium in which the basketball is in the pool. And you know that gravity is still in effect because when you drop a basketball in the medium of air, the normal world, not submerged underwater, it falls. So gravity is still acting on an object like a basketball in water or a helium balloon in air. This is different. This again is like two magnets repelling each other. We could think of it like that. Now here's the really interesting thing. This paper is not suggesting that there are new particles. It's not discussing the idea of new unknown, previously undiscovered particles. This is actually talking about something very familiar, sound particles, sound waves, the particle of sound, which are called phonons. That's right. Sound actually has particles. Sound is made up of particles, in a sense. So this is how it works. Sound waves move through matter and cause vibrations, and then those vibrations get passed through and on into our eardrum. That's how we're able to hear. So those vibrations, these waves are able to be described mathematically as particles. So it might not be exactly the same as what we would think of as a solid particle. But then again, the idea of solid particles isn't really accurate either. You definitely wouldn't think of sound as a solid physical object, even if it is made of particles. But technically speaking, no particles are solid and physical in the way that we would think of physicality, in the way that we would think of something like a desk or a book or something that's actually solid and we can hold in our hands. We tend to think of subatomic particles or even atoms as little solid pieces of matter. While they are pieces of matter, they're not exactly solid in the way that we would think. So subatomic particles, or even more complex structures like an atom, they're not exactly solid. What they are is a combination of probability and energy and different forces kind of rolled up into a single locality. So to think of them as solid isn't exactly correct. There's empty space in there too. It's more probability, empty space forces, that kind of stuff. And then when you have a lot of that piled up onto each other, to create molecules and molecules into more complex versions of matter, that's where you get the solid world around us. But atomically and subatomically, it's not solid in the way that we would think, which is really interesting. It's really cool. So this paper asks the question, what if sound waves actually do carry mass, but it's a negative mass? And that negative mass creates a type of negative gravitational field around it, which again seems strange, but based on physics, it's entirely possible. I mean, think about how crazy that sounds. How can you have negative mass? How can you have something less than zero? If we think of mass as substance, then that would be impossible. But mass isn't exactly substance. We have the wrong idea when it comes to what mass actually is. If we think of it more in terms of an interaction, and that's what mass actually is, an interaction between a particle and what's called a quantum field, and we've talked about that on this show before, then it makes sense how you can have negative mass or a negative interaction. Think of it sort of like electric charge or the two magnets like we described before. You can have a positive effect where, let's say, the two magnets connect together, or you can, or a positive electrical charge, or you can have a negative electrical charge. That doesn't mean that you have less than zero of a spark of energy or a spark of electricity. That's not exactly what charge is talking about. And it's the same with the force between two magnets. When you flip one of the magnets around and they repel each other, in a sense, it is a negative effect from what you previously observed, but it's not negative in the fact that it's less than zero if you're thinking of terms of physicality. But if you think of terms not in substance and physicality, but in terms of interaction, then this can actually make sense. So what mass is, all it is an interaction between an atom and the Higgs field. It's a quantum field. Everything in existence is actually made of these quantum fields. We see particles, but the real reality is quantum fields interacting with each other. So when you have a fluctuation or a little vibration in a quantum field, that vibration is the particle. When we look at a particle, that's what we see, that's what we recognize. But really, it's not a solid structure in the way that we think of solid. It's a vibration in one of these fields. So when you have something like a photon, a particle of light, that does not interact at all with the Higgs field and just passes right through it with no interaction, that is how you can have a particle be massless. You would think, how can something exist if it has no mass? Well, that's how, and that's also the same answer as to how you can have negative mass. You could think of our comparison or our analogy of the swimming pool earlier. If you're submerged in a swimming pool, you could think of the world around you as a water field. Everything around you is a water field. And when you move your hand through it, you get resistance. You could think of that interaction between your hand and the water as an interaction, and that's sort of like like mass. That's sort of like what mass is. And then there are other things, lighter things or things with different properties that might be able to move faster through the water, such as an air bubble or something. You could think of the air bubble as having a negative mass, in a sense. It's not a perfect analogy. There are no perfect analogies with these types of things, but you could sort of think of it like that, and that might help get our heads around it. So there's a few things to keep in mind with this paper. Now, while it's extremely exciting, and believe me, I sort of want this to be true because that would be really cool, and it would be another one of those redefinitions of life as we know it and matter and creation, God's creation as we know it, that I always find really exciting. But there are a few things to keep in mind. It's still incredibly early. This paper is purely theoretical, which means that those who put the paper out there, they came up with a hypothesis, and then they were able to support the hypothesis through some mathematics and calculations and things to show that this type of thing could be possible given the world that we live in. So it doesn't mean that it's true yet. That's still going to have to be held up to scrutiny, but all it shows is that according to our current understanding of physics, if this is the case, if sound waves or sound particles, if phonons actually have negative mass and create a negative gravitational field, it doesn't conflict with any current knowledge of physics. So it's purely theoretical at this point. Also, it has not been peer-reviewed yet, and that's a very big important part of the process of validating these things. So it could be, once other experts in this field get a hold of this paper, it could be that it gets validated at least by peer review, and then it would have to go through some experimentation and stuff like that, and further analysis and work. It could be that, or it could be that it gets peer reviewed and it gets totally torn apart. And we've seen both things happen in the physics community. The good thing about physics, especially quantum physics, is most physicists are very skeptical of things like this, so it's hard to let something slip through without somebody else tearing it apart if there's something wrong in it. Usually when we hear something wrong that we would consider wrong, say as Christians, it's because not of the science, but the interpretation of the science. So, when they say, well, quantum field theory proves there's no afterlife because there's no quantum field to take the information of a person's soul anywhere, that's purely it's purely an interpretation. It's not based in reality, and there's no way to test that. But sometimes they'll put out stuff like that as science. Now, this, on the other hand, is completely different. This is a scientific idea. It's a hypothesis. It's a theoretical paper right now, but it can be tested scientifically. So we need to wait for that to happen. But there is some interesting evidence that lends itself to this topic. For example, it's already been verified that negative mass particles do exist. They absolutely do exist. That's not even up for debate anymore. Scientists have even created a negative mass fluid in the lab last year. I was on Sci Friday to talk about this with Derek and Sharon Gilbert. Really fascinating topic, but they were able to create a fluid that when you push against it, it pushes back instead of moving in the direction that it's being pushed. It has a negative effect. It's like a negative mass, a negative force. And that's what these negative gravitational effects might be in phonons. Furthermore, the research team's leader of this current paper that we're talking about today, I want to make sure I get his name right, Alberto Nicolas, he provided some experimental evidence showing that phonons tend to bend upwards in their trajectories against the force of gravity rather than bending downwards the way that we would normally think if they have any kind of mass at all. He was able to actually show that experimentally. So from that, Nicolas was able to suggest that phonons produce a negative gravitational field. So it's not only that they inhabit it or that they're around it, but they're actually the source of this negative gravity field. You can think of it as an anti-gravity field. And what makes this interesting is this, if true, this could have some drastic effects on how we understand the universe and other objects in the universe, such as neutron stars. We've talked about that on this show before, too. Neutron stars have such a dense core that the phonons, the sound waves that are produced by them, travel almost at the speed of light. This could help explain some of the strange phenomena that we see with things like neutron stars and other stuff out in the universe. Also, if true, and if you'll excuse the pun, this discovery could have massive technological possibilities. Nearly endless. For example, imagine flying around the world in a vehicle that doesn't rely on jet propulsion to get around or anything like that, but instead creates a negative gravitational force to repel gravity. This would literally be an anti-gravity device, but it wouldn't use fuel the way that we would think. It would utilize this strange property of sound waves, which is extremely interesting in light of current and ongoing experiments with sound levitation, and there's been a lot of, you could even just type in Google sound levitation and get some pretty cool videos. Usually they're just able to levitate like drops of water and really small objects, and they're not exactly using the property of anti-gravity to do that. It's more of a pressure wave pushing up on something to counteract normal gravity. So you have the force of gravity pulling down in a totally different type of force pushing up as a pressure wave. So that's not the exact same thing, but what this could do is utilize this strange property that phonons seem to have and completely undo gravity. Think of it in terms of quantum computing. They're trying to utilize quantum entanglement, a strange property of quantum entanglement that says certain particles can communicate with one another faster than the speed of light. And saying faster at the speed of light isn't exactly accurate because there's no time interval between the communication process. It's at an absolute instant. So if computers can utilize that strange property, it's not that computers will run faster. It's not exactly the same thing as saying that, but instead it's that they will run at an absolute instant, which is really strange to think about. So it's not that if we're able to create craft that can utilize this type of technology, it's not exactly sound levitation like what we would think. It's not exactly that. It's using this strange property to lessen or to completely reverse the force of gravity, which would have, all sorts of benefits, but all sorts of consequences too. There are a lot of strange technologies that could be developed through that type of discovery. So, of course, that would lead some to concern, but me being as I am, I'm an optimist in a lot of ways, and it's kind of exciting for me to think about that. As spiritual people, for the Christians in the crowd that are watching the show, which I assume is most of you, but I know some atheists watch it too, and people of other religions, which is great. I'm glad that you do, as long as you don't mind getting a heavy dose of Jesus in every episode. But think about this in terms of prayers. Now, how cool is this? We know that when we pray, our prayers, they go up to heaven and God hears them. But think about this. If this is true, God created phonons in such a way that even physically, in a very literal way, our audible prayers bend up towards the heavens. And that's a pretty beautiful thought. And that's what gets me excited about this kind of stuff, that God seems to imprint his own personality into his creation, as any good artist does. So that's why I love discoveries like this. I kind of hope that this does turn out to be true, but even if it's not, something else will get discovered that I think will be equally as amazing, if not more so. That's usually how it tends to play out. So, of course, I would always like to know what you think. Leave me a comment in the comment section below. And also, don't forget to subscribe. You have to click the little bell, and YouTube still might not notify you when a new episode comes up. But if it doesn't, don't worry. Just know that every Thursday at 9 a.m., you will get a new episode of Into the Multiverse. So all that being said, thank you so much for watching. Leave me a comment. I want to know what you think about this. Is this, do you think that this is going to be discovered to be true someday? Do you think that it's just too far out there and there's no way that any of this is real? And if it is discovered, do you think that the technological benefits are a good thing, or do you think there's going to be consequences that will be harmful to humanity? I would love to know your thoughts. Leave me a comment in the comment section below, subscribe, and all that being said, thank you so much for joining me yet again on Into the Multiverse. It is good to be back in the studio with all you guys. Love you all, and until next time, take care and God bless.
From the Garden of Eden to our current day, dark Luciferian entities have worked to destroy mankind, while biblical prophecy points to a soon-coming war between earthly governments and a clash of colossal proportions. Dr. Thomas Horn says you cannot understand much of the Bible unless you read and grasp the revelations in the Gods of War Super Collection. For your $35 donation during this very limited time offer, you'll receive The Alliance of Evil, the groundbreaking new book by Pentagon analyst Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, which unveils the prophetic new dual Cold War between the U.S., Russia, and China unfolding across the global spectrum now. The Gods of Ground Zero, that explains the supernatural forces operating behind current global events. And The Last Clash of the Titans, which analyzes the most overlooked prophecies in the Bible and explains how Jesus Christ himself will soon go to war against the gods of antiquity. But with this 3-volume critical collection, you'll also receive completely free of charge the brand new, never before released full-length DVD War of the Gods Volume 1, Search for the Titans. Walk one-on-one with your personal guides Derek and Sharon Gilbert through a tour of the Holy Land, including Shiloh, Bethel, and Mount Hermon. You will see where the final battle between God and the rebel angels will take place. And you'll explore for yourself Sardinia's megalithic tombs of the giants, their connection to the ancient Canaanites, and the final battle. And that's not all. You'll also receive for a very limited time the best of the first annual Blessed Hope Prophecy Conference on DVD. This 2-disc DVD collection is jam-packed with over 11 hours of mind-boggling revelations from presenters like Dr. Thomas R. Horn on deep state saboteurs and the secret destiny of America, Sharon Gilbert on the return of the ancients through pharmakia, necromancy, and virtual reality, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis on the inside war against President Trump by elite secret societies, and unforgettable presentations from celebrated theologian Dr. Michael Lake, Derek P. Gilbert, Josh Peck, and more. But we're still not done. Skywatch TV's Off the Record series is back by popular demand with a brand new, never-before-aired DVD, The Gods of War Edition, featuring exclusive interviews with Detective Carl Gallups, Senior Pentagon Analyst Robert McGinnis, Derek and Sharon Gilbert on the coming hyper battle between the forces of God and the titans of biblical prophecy. This content is only available in this exclusive offer and will not be aired anywhere else. Included for a limited time with the Gods of War Super Collection. This unprecedented collection, sold separately, holds a retail value of $220. All 6 items yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. This, without a doubt, is the largest special offer of the summer and is available only while supplies last. So don't delay. The Gods of War Super Collection, available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order online or call 1-844-750-4985.